So shall we start at the beginning then? Do you want to talk us through a bit about your childhood and sort of any defining memories and when you first sort of got the taste of theatre and performance and all that side of things?
Yeah, like, so I was at school, and during my school years in primary school, I, like most people, ended up playing the recorder. Then I fell in love with music, and I studied the recorder so hard and long that I became the lead descant in a group of 7 of us, and we ended up in the Sydney Opera House playing in the Sydney Opera House there, amazingly, and we'd go around to Rotary clubs. So I was well into music. I really liked the people in the music group too, and I wasn't a sports person at all. I wasn't interested in that at all, but I was interested in music. I gave clarinet a go and didn't like the reeds in my mouth, so I said, oh, I don't really like this. So they said, oh, I'll try you on trumpet. So then they tried me on actual tenor horn first, and then tried me on trumpet. And then they said, oh, we think you might have the lips for the French horn. So I started learning the French horn after the recorder, after my huge success.
The Sydney Opera House playing your recorder.
Yeah, well, I mean, I loved it because we're playing to Queen, and we used to study the music of Queen, which was amazing because Bohemian Rhapsody came out in the 70s when, of course, I was a kid. And my teacher was really sort of, with it. And we were playing the recorder and studying Bohemian Rhapsody as a sort of operatic rock piece, and I absolutely loved it. And it was the only thing I found expression in. Everything else at school I hated, like maths, geography, English, history. I was hopeless at all of them. I just was not interested. The only thing I was interested in was music and musicals and things like that. And then in 1977, a movie came out called Saturday Night Fever. And John Travolta was amazing. And I saw some kids in the playground. This is when I'd gone to high school. I was in year 7 or year 8, my second year at high school. And it was an all-boys school. And it was a rough western suburb Sydney school, because I was brought up, of course, in Australia, Ballarat originally, but then my dad was in the Navy, so we moved around everywhere. And then I loved John Travolta's moves. And there was this guy in the playground doing them. And I went, that is amazing. How do you do that step? I just couldn't believe he could do it. And then he was teaching me in the playground how to do this step. And I fell in love with sort of dancing then, I suppose. Nothing ever became of it. I was still forced to do sport at school, which I absolutely hated. And then after year 8, we moved back to Ballarat, my hometown, because my father had 20 years in the Navy, and we moved back to our hometown. And so then I went to a co-ed school, and they didn't have a French horn because I wanted to continue studying that. And they said, oh, you'll have to play trumpet. We haven't got a French horn here. And the closest thing was a tenor horn, which was in a marching band. So I joined a marching band after school, which was the Ballarat Memorial Band, and I played tenor horn for them. But I don't know whether you know, it's all the offbeats. It's not particularly interesting. So I learned to walk on the beat and do the offbeats with my mouth. So I suppose it was progressive. But the dancing thing never came up again after Sydney. And when I was in Ballarat at the high school there, I asked to be, in the band, the high school band. And so they gave me trumpet. So I was second trumpet on that. And because I wasn't interested in sport and I was hopeless at sport, I decided to, I didn't want to do it at all. I just hated it. I came last in everything. And high jumping was just ridiculous. I just thought I'd always stop before the bar. I'd never actually attempt.
But you've got long legs. Surely you were designed for the high
Not
jump.
at the time. At the time, I was short and fat. And I came back from Easter after winning this big Easter egg, because I won a a colouring in competition when I was 13. I was just the right age. I scraped in, darling. And I won the sodding thing, and I was on the front page of the local newspaper. And it was so embarrassing because I was a paper boy in the morning and handing out these Ballarat couriers, and I was teased at school religiously. And I came back from the Easter break and I put on even more weight. And then my PE teacher said, "Oh, Craig, we really want you to, we'd like you to run around the oval with your shirt off, please, because you put on so much weight over the Easter break. You know, you need to get rid of it." So he made me run around the oval by myself in front of the PE class. And then from that moment on, they all called me Tits. So I was embarrassed. I hated my body. I didn't like sport. And there was nothing else at the school. There wasn't dance or anything like that at the school. And then I was complaining and sort of confiding in trumpet number one. Her name was Amanda. And she said, "Oh, I do all these classes down at Ballarat Lyric Theatre." Well, I didn't know it was that. She just said, "I do these classes." And she said, "If you do these exercise classes, you might like it because it's to music." And I said, "All right, well, I'll go one Thursday night." So I went down and I loved it. It was like aerobics, but it wasn't. It was a Jane Fonda sort of workout, if you like. But I didn't know it was actually called jazz ballet at the time. So, but I loved it. And the teacher said, "Oh, you should come back. You've got a natural ability to pick things up, and you've got a natural way with it. Like I could just watch it and copy it and be in rhythm." And I didn't know that I had that in me. And so I went back the following week and really, really loved it. And loved it so much I wanted there to be a class every single day, but it was every Thursday. And then I was asked to go to a school. The teacher said, "Oh, I think you really should think about joining Ballarat Lyric Theatre, which is an Amdram, place, because we're putting on a show and we'd really love you to be in it, but you'd need to be trained a little bit more in dance." And he suggested that I go to a ballet school. I went, ballet, really? I thought the ribbing I would get at school would be just horrendous. So I kept all of that secret. I went and fell in love with it. And from that moment on, my passion ignited for dance. I totally felt comfortable. I loved being in the theatre company. I totally adored the people around me. No one made fun of me. It was the first time that people were nice to me or kind, and it was an escape as well from family life, because I had quite an abusive father who was an alcoholic, not from the Navy. You can't blame that. He ended up an alcoholic, a desperate one. And he was absolutely vile to us all at home and was constantly ranting and shouting and abusive to my mum and us. So, because I'm part of quite a big family. I've got 3 sisters and a brother, and I'm the second eldest in that. I've got an older sister, then 2 younger sisters, then my little brother. And we're all tortured by him. So I couldn't wait, number 1, to get out of the house, and number 2, to have a passion, and number 3, to be treated nicely and be told positive things. So I was told then that potentially, if I worked hard enough, I could possibly have a career in the theatre, become a professional dancer. So I set my sights to that and did anything I could to achieve that goal. That was my ultimate goal. However, I had to leave school because I was hopeless at school. I was flunking everything except music. And art, I just passed. And then I decided to leave school at 15 and a half and do an apprenticeship as a chef, because I'd won a competition, Junior Chef of the Year competition in Australia, making up a recipe, etc. And that led me to then getting an apprenticeship as an apprentice chef. I hated that. I did that for 6 months, and then I got a job up at the local TV station as a trainee cameraman and cable puller. And all this time, I was still training in dance because I used the money from that to pay for the lessons. And then I kept that on, and then I became a sound recorder for the news team, all of that sort of stuff, which was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved the industry. And then I thought, right, I've got to get out of Ballarat. I need to move to Melbourne. That's where everything's happening. There's nothing happening in Ballarat, and I need to go sort of bigger, better, and actually train in a more professional way. So
and were there theatres in Ballarat? Were you able to sort of go to the theatre and experience it as an art form, or was it still at that moment a sort of fantasy? You know, you were partaking in it, but you weren't actually seeing it. Was that?
Well, Peter Allen, who was a famous artist, an Australian artist, who did marry Liza Minnelli and had a pseudo-American accent, very weird, but an incredible artist. He came and did a show, and I met him backstage at the Ballarat Lyric Theatre. You know, as the theatre that I first performed in. I ended up doing 2 Amjam shows there, and I went to see him live, and we went backstage to meet him afterwards, and it was like the biggest moment of my life. The first musical I'd ever seen, there was Jesus Christ Superstar, and that was in Sydney. My mum took us, and we were in the bleachers. We were totally, you know, so far away from the stage, but you could tell who Mary Magdalene was, because it was Marsha Hines' first black woman to play Mary Magdalene, you know, back in the 70s or whatnot. So I loved the theatre from that moment on, loved going to see it. But of course, there wasn't much in Ballarat to see, but there was in Melbourne, and we often had trips to Melbourne in order to see the theatre and to see ballet. I saw Lindsay Kemp's Flowers when I was 15, which is quite unique, and plus it was out there. I mean, it was totally nude, you know. It was just beautiful guys in either G-strings or totally nude, you know. It was quite aggressive theatre, but I just fell in love with it. I was captivated by it. I remember the first time I felt it was magic was when I went to see a ballet with the Australian ballet. And it's the first time I'd seen scrims moving out, you know, or gauzes, if you like, call them scrims in Australia, but gauzes here, and bleed-throughs. I just thought, how did they do that? How did that happen? Where it's just picture after picture, changing. I couldn't believe the magic of it. I was completely in awe of it, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do and wanted to be in somehow. I didn't know what. I knew it was too late for me to become a classical ballet dancer, because I started way too late, because I started training at 14 or something. And by then your bones have well and truly grown. So I didn't have a lot of choice but to go into musical theatre. And I basically moved to Melbourne from Ballarat, became a hairdresser to support myself there, did a year's apprenticeship as a hairdresser while I was training. I also then joined, in the evenings, I did a musical called Little Me. Famous actress in Australia, Maggie Kirkpatrick, who was in Prisoner Cell Block H. She played the freak. And she was famously in this company, and it was an Amdram one, and I was in the chorus, and I absolutely loved it. And so I was doing that at the same time as training as a hairdresser and being a hairdresser. And then I started auditions, and I auditioned for a show called West Side Story and got that. And that's when I became professional at 17. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And then
who played West Side Story?
I played Peppy, who is a shark. But all the sharks in this particular production, because I'd grown, dancing made me thin and tall. I literally, in 6 months, shot up to 6'2". I slimmed down completely. I was unrecognizable as the kid at school, you know, and I can't blame dance for that or exercise for that. Exercise, yeah, to get rid of the fat. But I had a growth spurt that just sort of made me tall and thin, and that helped. But certainly didn't help my feet, because I was always panicked that they were flat. You know, they were never as nice as like Darcy Bustles, for instance. You know, and I was always jealous of her feet. But anyway, it put me in better stead as a tap dancer. So I'm very lucky that I have flatter feet, because tapping requires that.
That's
so
incredible.
Yeah,
and was there any sort of thought around that time? I mean, I didn't know half of that stuff about certainly the instruments and the hairdressing and working in TV studios. You're sort of packing in so much before you're barely 20. Was there any thought then, as you're starting to perform professionally and stuff like West Side Story, that you're going to be a director, you're going to be a choreographer, or was it completely on the performative aspect at that time?
Only on performance. I never thought beyond that. I never wanted to be a star. I never thought that I could be. I never thought that that would ever be possible, because I always thought, well, I'm a dancer primarily. And then I got a show called La Cage aux Folles, and I loved that. And that was just so brilliant, because that's when I learned how to do drag. I learned how to dance in heels. I learned that you can be an actor, singer, dancer slash, you know, and that developed my voice as well, because I was having vocal lessons all the way through all of my dancing years and loved singing. So it was sort of perfect, really, that show, because I was understudy to all the main leads and also the Juve lead for the young guy, as well as all the drag queens. So that was an all-round sort of experience, and I fell in love with it. And it was from there that I really wanted to keep in that. I went to see in 1982, I think it was the September of 1982, I came over to London and I saw Cats. And I just went, oh my God, I cannot believe that people can sing so brilliantly and dance technically like that. I mean, it was unheard of. I'd never heard a dancer sing like I heard people in Cats. And then I went to see a show after that. It was a trip to New York called Dreamgirls, and that had just come out, and I was in awe. I just went, I have to be in this business. Absolutely have to be. You know, that was sort of driving force. So I've now backtracked a bit, but that was sort of why I decided, okay, I'm going to be a tiger. I'm going to work my arse off to actually achieve this. And I just went to Russian ballet class every morning at 9 o'clock without fail, 7 days a week. And I was working in the evenings. I was working, you know, just constant. It was constant. But I loved it because I had a lot of catching up to do. And then, of course, I got into all these wonderful shows. And La Cage was in 1985, and that was the second time that had been out. It was the first move that it had had from Broadway. But at the time, AIDS had just become prevalent, you know, and huge, and people were scared to go to the theatre. So no one came to see the show because they were scared they were going to, you know, catch AIDS from one of the drag queens. You know, it was that bad. It was
right.
And it lasted 6 months in Sydney and 3 months in Melbourne, and that was its downfall, because no one knew, like the pandemic now, how you get it. There isn't any knowledge about it. You know, it was just a death wish for people. So it's all sort of relevant now, isn't it, as well, when you think about it. But certainly that gave me a position that I really want to continue in the theatre, and loved it. And I was really sad that finished. But I went on to a show after that called Me and My Girl, from here, of course, and with the fabulous Gillian Gregory, who was the choreographer. And she was tough. You know, she used to scream at us, you know, in her British accent. And I went, wow, this is like really new. This isn't like in Australia. This is like someone international, working for international choreographers as well. And then I got into a show called Sugar Babies. And that was originally with Anne Miller and Mickey Rooney. And that taught me that you had to learn tap in literally 3 minutes. You know, you had to learn a song. They'd give you the song and you'd have to learn it and then start tapping it and singing it along with it, literally within that hour. That's what they expected. And if you didn't do it, then you'd be sacked. So that taught me muscle memory. And there were only 4 boys in it supporting, you know, the star. So I had to really pull my weight in that, and that pushed me into shape. I remember a friend of mine, Gerard Simons, I said, look, I can't keep up. This is terrible. I said, would you mind coming in at 8 o'clock in the morning and going through all the stuff just slowly with me? Because I'm just not getting it fast enough, you know. So I was learning on the job the whole time. And then that was a huge success. That was the best I think I've ever danced, actually. And I think as I was pushing myself a lot. And then I decided that I should really turn my hand to acting. So I started auditioning for plays, and then I got a play called Starkers, which was later called Ladies' Night, which was later called The Full Monty. It's exactly the same story, but it was started in New Zealand by two guys, and then they brought it. It was a hit in New Zealand, small, and then it came to Sydney, and they called it Starkers. It was called Ladies' Night originally. And then I played this character, Norman, who was a drug addict who went too far and took his clothes off and did all of that sort of stuff, but then learned through that experience, you know, to go on the straight and narrow and clean himself up, you know, but it's exactly the same story as The Full Monty. And so I did that, and the Danny LaRue show, which I toured New Zealand and Australia with. And then I got a call, and this is how I came over here. I got a call from...
I don't need to ask any questions. This is great. I'll just sit and listen.
No, I got a call from a friend in Paris, and he said, "Do you want to come and work at the Lido to Paris on the Champs-Élysées?" And I went, "Oh, wow, that sounds amazing. Paris." It just sounded really exotic and amazing. I couldn't speak a word of French. So I said yes, of course, only because I had a great body. I'd been working out every single day because I was stripping, essentially, in this play, and was playing a male stripper in it. So I had to have a good body. And I was 23 at the time. And I loved that play. I absolutely loved it. It was great because it was a play all the way up until the very end where I had to do dance, you know, rather than strip. So, but that was also enlightening because I'd never been on stage naked before. And also you have to be sort of brave the first time you do that in front of people nightly. But I loved it. So going to the Lido, at least I was wearing a G-string, and I'd have a blue fish on my head and a pair of sandals, and that's sort of it. You know, the costume change was literally just a slip. So I said, yeah, and it was an 8-month contract. I said, why not? You know, I'll learn a bit of French. So we had cassette tapes that you could plug in and then listen to French and then learn it that way. So I learned lesson 1 and lesson 2 off by heart, and by that time I was off. And I could really say nothing. So, je suis très désolé, you know, voici le vin, voici la clé, mais je n'ai pas de passeport, c'est très grave. That's it. So I learned lesson 1 and lesson 2, arrived in Paris, and then danced at the Lido for 8 months. Then I got bored of that because I wasn't singing. I was miming, and I was just one of 70 dancers. And it hit home when my sister came to Paris to see me in the show, and she couldn't pick me out because she was looking for the tall one, but they're all 6'6", and I was 6'2". I was one of the shortest boys there. And in a line of 70, she was looking for someone tall. She couldn't pick me out all night. So I thought, I really need to do something else, I think, with my life. So I auditioned for the Moulin Rouge as their principal singer and got the role. And then I did that. I studied the French for 3 months to sing it in French. And then it was my opening night. The leading lady said she didn't want to do the duets and like the recording to the duets. I said, well, I'll re-record the duets. She said, oh no, we're going to get a French session singer in to do that. So you have all your solos, but the duets, she wouldn't sing with me. And she, basically, I decided to leave after 2 nights because I thought, I'm better than this. I don't want to be miming to someone else's voice and pretending it's me. I said, I'm not doing it. And then I decided to get on a flight to visit my sister in Sweden. And then after that, I jumped on a flight to London. I arrived in London. I dropped my photo off at every single theatre I could. And I got a call back for a show called Anything Goes at the Prince Edward Theatre. I got down to the last 2, and it was between John Barrowman and myself, bizarrely, and never got the job. So I started working as a waiter at China Joe's at the Trocadero Centre that had just opened up. And during that time, Danny LaRue rang and said, do you want to join my company and go on tour? So I did that for a month. And then I auditioned for Cats and got in Cats and then joined the original Cats cast. And then after that, of course, I was just performing all the time. And straight after Cats, I went into Miss Saigon, joined the original company after 6 months with Lea Salonga and Jonathan Price and all of that lot. And then I stayed there for 3 years until I decided to leave and go and join a tapping show with Susan Stroman, who I'd heard a lot about, and Ruthie Henschel. She was starring in it, a show called Crazy for You. And that was also one of the Prince Edward. So I finally made it to the Prince Edward, but just not in Anything Goes. And then I did that for a year. And then Ruthie and I decided to leave the company because we thought staying anywhere longer than a year is probably too long. Because you do become stale, it becomes repetitious, and you end up having that sort of life in the West End where I'd seen people in Cats, you know, staying for 20 years, for goodness sakes. You know, it's not a career, is it? So I decided to leave, and Ruthie and I were going to go out to Australia to do it. Then Cameron pulled the plug on the Australian production, so we were jobless. So I had 3 months off work, and that was the first time in my life that I'd ever had downtime. So I decided to join the Actor Centre and do some lessons there, improv stuff, and then to pay the rent, I did 20 sculptures, had an art exhibition on the Thames, and then my art teacher would love this now, you know. My art teacher that said I was useless would love that. I sold every single piece bar one. I kept one, and it was amazing. So that paid my rent. Then the gold phone rang, and this is where the directorial and choreographic thing started. And my gold phone, because we sprayed it gold because it was the bank phone, like in the days where there were no mobile phones. One phone was like our personal line in the house, because I was in a house share like most people, can't afford to live by myself or anything. And we sprayed the gold phone, the bank phone, that one. I was scared to answer it because it's always like, you owe money. And then I answered it, and it was Susan Stroman calling from New York on Broadway saying, "Craig, do you think you could get out here on Monday?" I said, "Are you kidding?" She said, "No, I really want you to teach the American cast, the Broadway cast, Crazy View," because I was dance captain, so I knew all the stuff. And then she said, "I want you to join the American touring production of it. And then after that, we want you to go to Berlin with that production of it. Then after that, learning 3 versions, we'd like you to put it on in South Africa, mount it." And I went, wow, that was really cool. Because I had the lighting sorted, I had everything, every cue written in, the books, you know, as dance captain, so I knew exactly where to place people through the show. And I learned 3 different versions, took the show there. Cameron McIntosh then heard of the success of that and then asked me to be resident director on Miss Saigon. So I came back to Miss Saigon as resident director for a year. And then I was asked to be assistant choreographer on Matangere. And that's what I did. And then from then, I loved it. I got the bug for choreography. I thought, I really love this. I just loved it. I loved the creative process. I adored being able to work with directors as well. You know, like, it was just interesting hearing their insight. I loved the audition process. I loved being on the other side of it. You know, now I would never be nervous going for an audition because the people on the table are willing you to do it. Yeah. They really want you to do it. And you don't know that as a performer. You're so judgmental of yourself, aren't you? And it's just, and it's a frightening experience auditioning, but I sort of have my own way of auditioning people now. But certainly I used to be nervous and scared, but going on to the other side of it, everyone's just willing you the very, very best, you know, and I totally fell in love with it and decided to, after assisting many, many directors and being a theatre doctor for 8 years for Cameron McIntosh, and then theatre doctor as the creative team leaves for New York, I go in and fix and change it to suit the producers. So I was very much that. And then I decided to not do that anymore. And I decided to take a year where I was just going to be my own choreographer. So I went to Chichester Festival Theatre to begin all of that. I was offered a job called Pal Joey, and that choreography, which was wall to wall, even more than Crazy for You, put me on the map as a choreographer in my own right. So then I progressed to, because of the fantastic reviews for that, I got another show and working the Minerva. Then from the Minerva, we go into the big space. You know, it was great. And then I started working with fantastic directors as well. And plus, I worked under and trained under people like Declan Donnellan, who I absolutely love from Cheek by Jowl. You know, I just love his sort of targeting and his chaos and the madness and the empty mind that comes with it, and how you fill that empty mind, you know, the void. I just loved it. So that got me into directing, I suppose, because I ended up working with directors that I wasn't getting on with because I had my own opinions, you know. And as a choreographer, it's really hard to pick up, it's hard to start a dance if the director has left the scene in a way that you can't actually begin to dance. So, because as they say, if you can't say it, you sing it. If you can't sing it, you dance it. And you can't just go straight from a play or the book, the script, directly into dance. There has to be some reason to dance. So I was constantly inventing things, which I loved, because in scripts, normally, the director's very lucky. He gets clues. They get clues because you can you have the text, and that gives you a clue of what might be going on, or what the writer was actually trying to say here, or what your interpretation of what the writer is trying to say. But in the scripts, they say they dance. That's all the instruction you get. So you've got to come up with very good reasons why. You know, and I learned that through working with David Pountney in Opera North a lot, because I've done a lot of operas, and most of them in foreign languages, you know, really difficult, tough, you know, operas, especially with David Pountney, where he thinks completely outside the box. And he would leave me to a 12-minute choreographic session. I mean, 12 minutes of choreography for a ballet. And well, it's sort of about Sputnik and the Russians. So can you get something out of that for 12 minutes? Yep, I can try. That's when you become creative, you know, so you've got to really go home and go, wow, what could it be? And generally, I don't make anything up until I get into the room with the people. And that scares a lot of directors, I know that. And it scares.
Well, that was one of the things that really struck me when we did Sister Act at Curve together, and I was just so sort of inspired and blown away and amazed at how open you were. And you know, you stood up on the first day and said, look, I haven't planned any of this, we're just going to go into the room and we're going to play together and we're going to be creative. And you know, so often as directors we make sort of grand statements on the first day, and you know, some of them are being slightly flexible with the truth, but my goodness, you absolutely stuck to your guns and did what you said, and you were so open and so courageous in the space, and it was such an amazing thing to witness.
I think you have to be. I think it takes a lot to develop that, I think, because you have to have an open mind. And it was Declan Donnellan that really did sort of teach me how to empty my head in order to let creativity in, or not to be bound by a story, because you can sit at home, you can read a script, and you can be really meticulous about how you want to see something or how that should be done. But actually, that's not involving any of the actors. It's not involving the company. It's not involving them, so they take ownership of it. And I think that's important. And plus, they need to see you vulnerable. You're not, I don't believe you are, or any director is the powerhouse, you know, or the only person with the concept, or the only person that can see that. I think it's our responsibility as directors to embrace everybody and see clearly the arc of the whole piece. I think that's important. But I think when you get into the room, other people's ideas are sometimes going to be better than yours.
Totally.
And you need to take that and then use it and propel, you know, the storytelling. And, you know, it's people have amazing minds, and I can't work with directors that are egotistical in that way, and I have done, you know, and I've always promised myself that I would go in and expose myself as I'm asking the actors to do, and I think that's important. And I'm not a fountain of knowledge. I don't know everything. I know that I have a feeling, behind something if it's right or wrong, you know, but you can over-intellectualize things, and a lot of actors do that, bad ones, where they intellectualize it and don't show you actually what it's all about. You know, I always say to those actors, darling, that's all very well. We could spend 3 hours pulling this script apart. Can you show me what you mean?
Yeah.
You know?
Can you allow yourself to be vulnerable and to be open and to, you know, offer something of yourself?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, every artist starts with a blank canvas, you know, and each brushstroke gives you another idea. And that initial drawing could become a masterpiece. You know, you just don't know, do you? And I love that about the theatre. And that's what attracted me to directing as well as choreographing. I still work with directors, though. I mean, I love working with directors. There's not many directors that work with directors.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing, isn't it? Because I think you get your own style. I'm being very lucky because I've gone through the progression of making the transition between choreographer to director, which was quite difficult to get producers to think that I wasn't an airhead choreographer that just came up with steps. You know, I think that was the initial difficulty until I was given an opportunity to direct, and I did most of that groundwork. I've got to be honest, in Europe, I was given a lot of leeway in Europe to be myself, and that honed in my skills as a director, particularly working in foreign languages is so difficult, as you're fully aware, and getting the story right, you know, through the language of the people. So that taught me a lot. And then when I came back to the UK from doing that work, I felt really armed. I just remember there was I was doing a show, a revival. Oh, Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat. I'll never get over that. I fretted and fretted and fretted. Guys and Dolls, of course, I'm talking about. And I was doing it, where was it? It was up north, Sheffield. And for Michael Grandage. Mm-hmm. And it's so famous. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. It's so famous. The choreography is so famous. The concept behind it is so famous. And I wanted, and we're in the round. So I couldn't set up a church just as a normal church, and I didn't want it to be normal, but I was racking my brain. I mean, to the point where I didn't sleep at night. And I thought, Craig, take your own advice. Go into the room with nothing in your head. And on the walk to the theatre, I remember going for my digs. On the walk to the theatre, I was panicked. I thought, I've got to teach this to a company of 30 people, and I have no clue what I'm going to do. I had ideas, and I was abolishing every single one. And then it turned up, I made them do a vocal warm-up just to give me a bit more, like 20 minutes. I said, I'll do a 10-minute physical. And then I walked into the middle of the room because I still had no clue what I was going to do. And I just literally stood up and turned around and fell flat on my back in the middle of the room. It all went silent. Everyone was stood around in a circle looking at me. And I went, that's it. We're in a circle. Let's put him in the middle, and we go all in, all out, do all, and then suddenly bang, 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 in an hour I had the whole number down, and it was amazing.
And so that's where the idea came from. And I think it's interesting listening to you, because I think, so I know that feeling exactly when you're walking into rehearsals and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have an idea for this scene, or I've got no idea what to do.
Awful.
But of course, you've been thinking about it. It's all there in your subconscious. You just need to find the right conduit, the right way to release it.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about it. That's what I love about it. I love pushing actors so they discover something new about themselves that they didn't even know they could do. I mean, that's also part of the joy. You know, bringing people out of themselves, or just letting them, or being a tool to prise them open so they become actually their creative selves rather than hiding behind the word. Because some actors do that, you know, and I think it's really important to investigate what it actually means, because it could mean a whole host of things. You know, one line could be said 50 million different ways, as you know. But it's our job as a director to make sure that the links in the story happens as a beautiful arc, as I've said before, you know, and I think, you know, that is your responsibility, and you have to take on responsibility for the whole company. And I sort of like that too. And I had a run-in with a director who shall remain nameless, but I was working on a show and I just did not see eye to eye. And his opinion was just to cut all the dancing and get a better script. And I thought, well, you may as well be doing a play, not a musical. And I thought, why am I here? So I decided to resign, and then they wouldn't allow me to resign. And I said, I'm never doing a job like this again. And I didn't. I said, from this moment on, I'm going to direct and choreograph. No collaboration.
That's brilliant. And what other sort of ambitions? I mean, it's so incredible, your career and all of the, you know, this idea of being open and vulnerable and trusting your instincts. It's led you to all of these extraordinary places, you know, the Moulin Rouge in Paris and West End shows and Broadway and, you know, internationally. So what other sort of ambitions do you have creatively? Obviously, there's the whole Strictly thing that we've not even begun to touch on, but you're such a sort of true Renaissance man. You're such a man of the arts. What else do you sort of long to do?
Well, I love longevity of film and television. And I've learned to, I mean, you're obviously in theatre, I get such a buzz out of it because it's live every single night and it's always different. I mean, you know, as a director, and I know that every show that you go in and see, you could be writing different notes for different people all the time. And that always changes because the actors are improvising in a way, you know, and every night is different. Their feelings are a little bit different. Their energy might be lower, or they might be hearing something differently or making sense of something for the first time. I mean, we know as actors that you can say a line over and over again, and then you could do 2 years in a play, and then it's not until 6 months after you've been out of that play that you fully understand what that moment was actually about, and then you've got it wrong. You know, so you know, that's why I love live theatre. But what I love about film and television is you get to edit it, you get to be specific, and it's there for everyone to see forever. And it's recorded. You know, I think that's what's great, you know, about that. And I would personally love to do more of that work, like the ballet boys do with Sadler, you know, with their stuff. You know, I love the fact that they film it all. I love the fact that they, you know, when I was choreographing a ballet for them, they had cameras hidden and then used that footage in a really funny way, you know, of me giving notes of what the, you know, the intent was behind this whole thing. And it was brilliant. And I thought, wow, that's caught me actually in my light without me being guarded. Whereas like Strictly Come Dancing, for instance, I'm judging a television show. It's not a real competition. You know, it's celebrities trying to dance with professionals who've danced all their lives. We have to remember these professionals are now out to pasture. They're no longer good enough to compete because they have to go through that process, and then you come on to Strictly, you know, and then they can pass that valuable information on to their celebrity artists. But you know, that was just that's my Saturday job, I call that. You know, I find it fun to do, and it's been amazing because it's given me a platform on which to stand, which I'm truly happy about. It's a name, I have a name now that people have learnt and know, for one thing, but it's sort of hopefully bringing people back to the theatre, or hopefully getting some film done. I love that. I did my first feature film, not choreographically, but as an actor, called Nativity Rocks, and that was part of the Nativity series. It was the fourth one in the series, directed by Debbie Izzet, and it was amazing because it's like Mike Lee, all completely improvised. There is no script. There is no story. You make it up on the day. Even if there's 1,000 extras, you're making it up. That's my first scene was an arrival at an airport. I couldn't believe it. I said, oh, okay, I've got Louis Vuitton luggage, because there was someone wheeling that up. Oh, and that's my PA, obviously, who I'd never met. You know, the actors I'd never met. And they said, oh, basically the direction was, oh, can you walk along this corridor? You've just arrived at the airport and you're really famous. You're coming from America and you're a famous director and you're going to be greeted by press and they're all going to ask you questions. I said, what sort of questions? Oh, you'll see when you get there, darling. So that, I was, to be honest, I was really shitting myself. I really was, you know, like walking around the corner. And then when I saw all of that, I went into it and I just started listening for the first time, listening to every question and then making stuff up. And it was just amazing. I loved it. And I would kill to do that again. I know Mike Lee does that as well.
And goes right to the spirit of what you want to bring to rehearsals as a director, that sort of openness and, as you say, listening and being alive in the moment.
Yeah. Listening, the most important thing. It's what people don't do in musicals. That's what I learned. I thought that's the biggest note I've ever had to give, is people aren't listening to one another. They're on, you know, autopilot. I mean, so I have been guilty of it myself. I remember my 3rd year in Miss Saigon. I came off stage. I had no clue I'd even done the show. Isn't that awful? I thought, did I just do a show? Or was it a matinee day? I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Because you've been just on autopilot, which means I wasn't listening. I was guilty of all those things. And it's far more pleasurable to actually listen and react, definitely. You know, and certainly I've learned that as a director. I've learned that as a choreographer, because it's exactly the same, and as an actor. And to answer your question, I'd like to do more acting in that field. I love it. It's a big challenge for me. It's something I'm inexperienced in too, that I need more experience. I would then eventually love to learn enough about film to direct and create something of my own, you know, a piece that I'd be really proud of. You know, I guess Bob Fosse, you know, is one of those people that did it, that changed film and how people look at dance and movement and story in close up, and then suddenly in, you know, kaleidoscopic, huge panoramic sort of color. And I mean, he was amazing at just paring down what is essential, you know, and I love that too. So, I mean, there's still a lot I've got to give, and a lot I want to do. You know, I know that I'm releasing an album. I'm doing a duets album at the moment with my friend Rietta, that no one sort of really knows about. Well, they're not used to me singing that way, so, and neither am I, and that's a challenge. Something that's on my bucket list.
From our Annie experience.
Oh yeah, Annie. Voice. Oh yeah, the Annie thing. That's great, though. I mean, the interesting thing about, you know, Annie and playing Miss Hannigan is the first time really I'd had to play a serious role, of course, because in Panto I played dames left, right and centre, but never a real woman or a person, you know what I'm saying, in that way. You can't break the fourth wall. You can't step outside the box and be Craig Revel Horwood for any point at any time, you know, in it. And that's what I loved about it, because you have to stick to script. You can't improvise, you know, and you have to bring that script to life, and it has to be fresh and new every single day. And particularly working with so many children, because their reactions are going to be totally different. So you have to listen, and you're forced into improv listening mode, you know, even though you can't improvise you can improvise the intent, but you can't improvise the words, you know. And I found that a real challenge, and that's sort of what I loved about it.
Yeah, and I was amazed.
Your fabulous direction, darling.
Well,
Come
of
on.
course.
You know.
And there was no artistic differences at all.
No, I generally do what I'm told. I'm quite good when I'm an actor.
No, I was amazed.
Do it again.
I remember when we first started, I was you know, I was anxious and thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to be a very interesting sort of negotiation, directing a director.
Yeah.
But you were completely, as you've described throughout this sort of chat, you were completely open and vulnerable and wanted to be directed and wanted to take guidance. And I thought it was so incredible. I mean, you talk about the fourth wall, and there were times where the audience were really sort of encouraging you, willing you, forcing you to break that fourth wall, and you were so immersed
Oh, yeah.
in your character that you were absolutely having none of it. And I thought your discipline, you know, was fantastic. And as you say, listening to the kids, listening to the youngsters, playing the scenes off them,
Yeah.
so many different, you know, groups of orphans coming in every few months and different Annies, and you were absolutely incredible. It was fantastic.
Well, that was a gift of a role. I mean, it's written so beautifully as well, directed, as I have to say, exquisitely. You know, I loved it because it was a modern take on it too. You know, it wasn't stuck in its boots. It didn't feel like Broadway. It felt like a real situation, you know, and I thought that was just genius, you know, absolutely genius. So I was very proud of what you achieved and what the whole company achieved. I thought it was incredible. And in fact, you know, getting on to what Curve does, you know, and that's why I love that theatre so much. It's because everyone there is allowed to speak. You have a voice, you know, and you can be creative and inventive. And I think there aren't many theatres that allow you to do that. I work at the Watermill a lot, well, did for 7 years, you know, a very, very small, you know, 200-seater with literally 4 foot across. No, 4 meters across, so you can stand one person, 4 people across the front of the stage. You know, as you know, it's like a small space, you know, but that's negotiating spaces. But I mean, they have a certain client, and they like certain things as well. So you have to always appease producers at the same time. But Curve, I think, was a really creative space to be in. Also, everyone's under the same roof, you know, which I think is fantastic. Nothing's hidden. People speak out about what they think, which I think is great, because it's better coming from them than the press. You know, I think it's a really exciting venue, and I miss it too.
Yes.
To be honest, I really miss it, and want to get back there, you know, whenever we're allowed to.
Yeah, well, likewise. I mean, I can't tell you how desperately sad we all feel at the moment, not being able to, you know, go into the building and, you know, feeling this great sort of distance. But, you know, we'll be back, and it'll be even more, you know, special than before, because, you know, just the sense of loss and, you know, sadness that we feel at the moment, that's going to fuel us so much in the future, I guess. And
Completely.
What do you think theatres like Curve, what do you think our role will be coming out of this lockdown and sort of looking to the future? What do you think theatre's role will be sort of moving forwards?
I think theatre's role will be equal to that, to, you know, when every time you have something big happen in the world, it changes everything from that point on. And I think Curve will pick up the pieces, and Curve will present things to the world that they've never seen before. I think it's an opportunity for people to invest in different emotions, you know, or not your usual, oh, this is love, this is lust, this is, you know, it's not going to be just Romeo and Juliet. I think Curve is going to pave a way, I think, for future productions, because Curve, I think, teach people a lot of things. I think the creative minds within the theatre there are incredible, and they will see something in this that will touch the nation. Like, for instance, a musical, for instance, I'm being absurd, but about a man before his 100th birthday walking his garden, for instance. Now, who would have thought that could, at the present, £27 million has been raised for it, but that's only because it's touched the minds and hearts of the nation.
Yeah,
and I
totally
think this is Curve's,
but
I think this is Curve's job as well. I think it's theatre's job to simplify and get to what people love, you know, and emotions that people have forgotten about. And I think, you know, certainly that's the job of the theatre anyway, is so the audience learn something about other people, but at the same time learn something about themselves. I think that's really important, that people associate with it. And I know that Curve are creative, you know, although all the minds there look to that. And just the simplicity of Captain Tom, for instance, doing that very simple gesture with nothing else really to gain for himself. You know, he didn't want to hit #1 single, but he got it. he didn't think he'd get above £1,000, but he got, you know, into the multi-millions. I mean, it's insane, isn't it? You know, it's just something, taking that idea on board and then flying with that for the first event, you know, for the first show. It's touching people in a way that they haven't been touched before, you know. And I think we always think that it's like you can be slightly limited in your thinking, that love is just love, and, you know, anger is anger, and passion is passion, and pain is pain. But there are always other ways to tell stories, and there are always simpler ways to do it. I'm not getting entirely to my point, but the point I think I'm making is Curve will be the ones that lead, I think, the theatre through our next phase of theatre, and it will change. There's without a doubt, and I think it has to. I think it has to be. I mean, there were times when Fosse would change it and be so aggressive with his choreography, or so sexual that people were offended. I mean, in 1756, for instance, when the waltz came out, that was offensive. You know, it was banned. It's hard to believe, isn't it? You know, times do keep changing, and you have to change with them. But I think, you know, the lesson that Captain Tom has taught us all is that one simple gesture or one simple emotion can be transported in such a humongous way and touch everybody that's concerned. And that's what audiences want, I think. People want entertainment, but they don't just want razzle-dazzle. You know, and I think it's a way of incorporating the razzle-dazzle into, because, you know, Captain Tom has razzle-dazzle. He has showbiz. Bizarrely, he's not aware of it, though. That's the beauty of it, you see. And I think it's the unaware. I know. Well, I'm hoping the Curve will lead us. I'm looking for them to lead us into a different world, a different era of theatre, a different way of presenting theatre. We may have to sit opposite sides of theatre, and the theatre might have to come to the person in that way. It might have to be digitally enhanced. It might have to be a different form. And I think it's really exciting. Yeah. I really think it's exciting. And plus, these few months that, of course, we've got to collect and think about what it is about theatre and what makes people come to see it. I think we really have to think about that and then come up with something. It's an opportunity to come up with something brand new, I think. Nothing's ever brand new, but Captain Tom is brand new, but that's not brand new. Do you see what I was saying? Yeah. So there is that thing. You know, you could have got the best marketing minds in the world to think about what they can do to raise money for the NHS. Well, one person did it, and it's better than all of them. You know? It's amazing. It's amazing. People rack their brains. Oh, before I'm 100, I'm just going to do 100 laps there, all right? Amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, but that's what we're looking for in the theatre, the extraordinary. But we don't want to celebrate the ordinary in that way. Yeah. We need to celebrate the extraordinary, and out of the ordinary is the extraordinary. So it's really great. I mean, it's a great opportunity for all of us as creatives to express ourselves in a completely different way. And plus, being locked up, you know, you might think about how Zelda Fitzgerald felt, you know, locked away in their room and then dying in a fire. You know, you might have to think about that. Well.
Maybe we won't think about that for too long. We don't get depressed in this.
I know, but she wrote some beautiful words, some great words, and it was all plagiarised by, you know, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yeah. I mean, I'm only sort of in tune with that because I've got a fabulous book on it, and plus I did direct the musical, so it's the first thing that sprung to mind. You know, that we can use this time wisely and hopefully deliver better theatre, more interesting theatre, theatre that people want. You know, people want to get out and socialise, obviously, but if that's not possible, then we've got to choose and invent ways to get around that, to entertain people. People need their minds taken off things. They need their minds to travel. They want to be taken to different worlds, you know, and this is a really good opportunity, I think, for Curve to do that. So you've got a big job, darling.
Blimey, Craig. I mean, my
Blimey.
goodness, you've put down the gauntlet there. That's a humongous challenge. But listen, it's been amazing chatting to you. You have entertained and inspired and really transported us over the last hour. So thank you so much.